Hey everyone, it's Anthony Mosora with Anthony Mosora Health, and I have a treat for you today. I'm here with Shawn Sherman, and prepare for your mind to explode. So, Shawn, he is the developer of the Square One system. Shawn earned his exercise and sports science degree from the Penn State University and operates a private practice in Western Springs, Illinois. Over the years, Shawn has held numerous industry certifications and therefore understands what and how the conventionalists think and believe. Over the past 25 years, his understanding of movement has evolved from that of an apprentice level to a level of mastery by continually seeking answers to his questions. Because he now intimately and thoroughly understands the most basic components of movement, he brings an unparalleled perspective to the table. Not only does he consistently deliver absolutely amazing results to his clients, he teaches his students to be able to do the same. And it's just amazing on his website reading through the consultations that he's had, such as with the United States Olympic team, for wrestling, men's speed skating, women's soccer, the Chicago Cubs, Chicago White Sox, Chicago Blackhawks, Chicago Bears, and so on. There's a big list. And so just very grateful to have you on here, Shawn. Now, this is kind of interesting because it was actually a few years ago, one of my great mentors, Dr. Peter Glidden, had interviewed Shawn, and I watched that interview and my mind exploded. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I know that Shawn was able to help Dr. Peter Glidden in a significant way with his functionality, with his movement. And so that got me interested. And over the last few years, I've been kind of seeing what's been going on, kind of hearing about what's going on. And then here lately, I've really kind of dived in to learn more about what Shawn's been doing. And so thank you for taking the opportunity to get on here, and let's go ahead and dig in. I'd be interested in hearing, Shawn, if you can tell me a bit about yourself, kind of what brought you to this point of where you are, and I'd be interested. Go ahead and let loose.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on your program. And that introduction is like, it's kind of embarrassing, but the guy you read about sounds pretty cool. So it's funny. Yeah, I've been really so fortunate to have some pretty unbelievable opportunities to share my work at some pretty high levels. Not usually it's with individuals, but yeah, we've had some pretty cool experiences. So I guess your question was to share a little more about like kind of like my history a little bit and how I came to be doing what I'm doing. And I'm just a guy with a 4-year degree uh, in exercise and sports science. So I started off early in my career as a personal trainer, and that whole time, prior to being a personal trainer, I had actually hurt my back playing high school basketball. And my dad had a bad back since before I was born. So back pain's always been kind of a part of my life, through watching my dad deal with his issues. And then when it occurred, or when I first incurred my back pain issue at about age 14 or 15. And so pain was always on the forefront of my mind. So when I was in high school, I really thought I was going to become a physical therapist. And then in college, I was really thinking about becoming a chiropractor. And I did some observational hours as part of my studies, and I really liked what I saw. And I had some chiropractic care, and it helped a little bit, especially the first time I went to a chiropractor. A little bit kind of limited in its ability to help me after that, but I was kind of thinking in terms of helping people who had pain. And then another little side note of my own little personal history: growing up in central Pennsylvania, our next door neighbor, it was called Walnut Acres. It was the very first organic farm in the entire United States. So I'm looking back at my history. I'm like, wow, I kind of always been surrounded by like alternative ways of looking at solving problems in this health area. So, so when I was in college, I goofed around a lot like I did in high school, and I had better grades in college than I did in high school, but I was really more interested in just playing pickup basketball. So, I was kind of like a B plus student in college. I did okay. But I really wasn't that serious in my studies. So that kind of ruled out me going to physical therapy school because that's very, very competitive. I had buddies that had like 3.95s and they, had to wait 2-3 years to get accepted. And that was okay by me. I'm like kind of easy come, easy go. I'm like, well, that door was closed, and the only person I can blame is me because I was more interested in shooting hoops than I was in studying for that organic bio or organic chemistry exam. So so still thinking about health and kind of alternative care. And I was working as a personal trainer. I moved out to Chicago and had back pain, and here I'm working with all these people and doing different stretches and strengthening them, and trying to help them lose weight or help them with their back pain. And so I'm trying to help people with back pain, and I'm the guy suffering with back pain. I was absolutely clueless, and I kind of knew I pretty much knew I was clueless about that. So I never really put myself out there as someone who's helping people with back pain, but that was a very commonly stated goal that a lot of these people had. And I'd visited a couple chiropractic schools in my early to mid 20s, and I don't know, there's this inner voice it was never really telling me to pull the trigger. So I just held off on it. And I just kept pursuing this, this fitness thing. And what had happened was I took a job for about 10 months in sales, actually. So I got away from fitness and health and human performance for about 10 months, and I was selling conference calling, and I had zero passion for that. Now I was making about triple my income than I was as a personal trainer. So that's what lured me away. And I soon found out that I don't care how much money you pay me. I have to have passion for what I'm doing, or I'm out. Because this is by the time I'm like in my mid to late 20s, I'm probably 25, 26 years old. And I'm like, I'm going to be whatever it is I'm doing for work. I'm probably going to be doing this for 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 more years. So I'm gonna shoot myself if I'm staying in sales. I just didn't like it at all. And so when I got back into fitness, and I kind of reacquired my personal training studio that I had started about 4 or 5 years earlier, I was kind of scared. I felt like, oh my gosh, the whole world passed me by in these 10 months. Like I better start taking a bunch of classes again. So I actually already taken I went to a bunch of different workshops because I didn't want to be the guy who was like kind of left behind. And things moved slower than I thought at that time. I didn't realize that really nothing really changed in those 10 months, but I had this weird fear that like everybody passed me by, and I don't want to be that guy. Like I'm back into fitness, and I want to be in the front of the class. I want to be leading this stuff. I don't want to be the guy I'm not a follower type person. I mean, I like to learn things, and I don't mind being like in the student role, but I want to learn the best information that I can. And I want to help people as best as I can and be very proactive about that. So I ended up, I heard about this one course that was coming to Chicago at this workshop, and it was about something about mechanical low back pain was part of the title of this course, and it was put on by the guys who started Muscle Activation Techniques, MAT. They're based outside of Denver, and I'd never heard of it, and so I went and watched this these guys do their presentation, and I was like, wow, this is really, really cool, and ended up becoming a student, an early adopter of that MAT system. And that was back in 2000 and that would have been 2002. Yeah, I've been 2002. So I ended up jumping into that course, and that was like a 8 or 10 month experience. I had to fly out to Denver 8 or 9 times for 3-day weekends. So it's fairly involved. I mean, you're talking, it's 24, 25 days of, 8-hour days, about 200-hour course. And I learned how to do neural response muscle testing there. So I'm eternally grateful for that experience, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for that experience. And so with MAT, it was really cool. Basically, the whole gist of that program is comparing the right side of the body to the left, looking for asymmetries of range of motion. So wherever there's a restriction in range of motion, MAT teaches us to view that restriction as protective muscle guarding. And so I became a zealot for that system because I was getting great results with my clients. I got personal help with my back pain. Wasn't perfect, but I was 80 or 90% better from MAT. I mean, it was very, very impressive, the progress that was made on my own body by that system. And that what I did with that system then too is I wanted to be like, all right, this is so cool. I'm helping a lot of people. Like 2 out of 3 people were getting phenomenal results. So I actually introduced it to the Chicago Cubs. So I was lucky enough that I got those guys to answer their phone. I just called through and got through the training staff. And, I got in for like kind of like an interview. I went in and showed them MAT, and then they ended up hiring me. And I was with those guys for about 5 or 6 years. I'm going to say it was probably, I could be off of my dates a little bit, but I think it was the '04 season. It was the year after Sammy Sosa was there, because everyone wants to know about Sammy Sosa, but I was never in the room with Sammy. Sammy was already gone. So I want to say, if my memory serves me correct, I think it was '04 through 2009. I was, the first and only guy at the time using MAT in Major League Baseball. A lot of cool success stories there. And then, kind of rambling here, but yeah, so kind of what ended up happening was I was using MAT. Like I said, I was a big zealot for it, and I was promoting the heck out of that guy's business, and we were, getting MAT was growing, not just because of me, but we were helping him grow here in Chicagoland. And in 2008, I had this one client that I had been working with him for about almost 5 years. I met this gentleman, Al Kamenecki, as a client. It would have been November or December of '03. So soon after I got certified in MAT, and after 2 sessions of working on him, I was able to produce 0 changes. Nothing positive was happening. So, and that was rare with MAT. Because MAT, every system has its shortcomings. But for any shortcomings it does have, it's really good at quickly changing range of motion on a very high percentage of people. It really is. And I was not able to do that with Alan. And I told him after 2 sessions, I said, man, I don't know what you stepped in, but I don't think this MAT is a good fit for whatever's going on with you. And he's like, hey, man, I'm going to stick with you because you're not a liar. Because I've been to all kinds of PTs, all kinds of chiropractors, massage people. I've been to all kinds of different titles. And they usually don't tell me that they can't help me until they've had 40, 50, 60 cracks at me. So the fact that you're telling me after 2 sessions that you can't help me, I know you're not lying to me, because you're willing to walk away from thousands of dollars. You could have kept this going. And I'm like, that's great. Thanks for the compliment, but I don't know what else to do with you, man. I kind of exhausted using this system on you. But he wasn't having it. So he just kept coming in to see me like once a month or so. So I was working with Alan like 10 or 12 times a year. And I just kept doing MAT on him. I'm trying to improve range of motion, trying to get some stability to his body, because MAT's whole view is wherever the body lacks stability, there'll be an associated lack of mobility to protect you from going further into a vulnerable position. And that's a good theory. It's just the problem with it is it's not the only source of restrictions in range of motion. And I didn't know that at that time, I didn't know that. So how I came to have my horizon like kind of blown away was when I was working with Alan Kamenecki in 2008. He was in for a session. It would have been September of 2008. And I said, hey man, we're going to do no more MAT on you. I don't know what we're going to do, but I know we're not going to do any more MAT, because this is literally the definition of insanity. You keep coming back to see me. You're expecting a different outcome. I'm not. So you're the crazy person, not me. Like, this is stupid, man. Like, I'm not going to help you with this. I told you that, 50 sessions ago, and now we're 40, 50, 60 sessions in, and we're really no further along. His legs would get, bilaterally, he'd get numbness down his legs after we do MAT. And that system it's not like it's messing people up, for the most part or anything like that. But this guy was having really adverse reactions when I would do it with him, but I was his only source of hope. And here I'm telling him I can't help him. So what I did is, this guy's always cracking jokes, and he's like, all right, mocking me and making jokes about, well, what are we going to do? And like, dude, just shut up for 5 minutes, man. Let me think. I don't know what we're going to do, but just keep your yapper closed for like 5 minutes. And so then I came up with it. Hey, I don't know what we're going to do. I just know we're not doing MAT, and we're going to do the polar opposite. So if I'm thinking, hey, we're going to go right, we're going to go left. And if I'm thinking internal rotation, we're going to take an external approach or an external rotation approach to this. And that makes no sense, because here, if I see that you can't do something, why would I not try to help you be able to do that? So it didn't make sense at all to me. It didn't make sense to him, but that's what we did. And what Alan really presented with, the 2 big restrictions he had was he had no ability to internally rotate either leg. So I'd grab his legs, grab his ankle, and I'd check, turn it in one side and then the other. And he really, to this day, I don't know if I've ever had anybody this bad. He had maybe a degree or 2, like almost like, it's like someone poured concrete down his legs and his knees and his ankles. Like, he just couldn't turn in at all. It was weird. And nothing we did ever changed it. And then the other thing he couldn't do is when I put him on his belly, I would say it'd be like an analogous to putting a turtle on his back. I mean, this dude was stuck. You put him on his belly, he immobile. He couldn't lift his head off the ground. Like, his forehead would be stuck on the ground. He couldn't even extend at all. from his, T-spine, lumbar spine, hips. He couldn't lift a leg off the ground. He couldn't lift his arms if they're at his side. They couldn't clear off the ground. So he was like glued to the table when you put him on his belly. It was nuts. And so what we did in that session back in September 2008 is I put him on his back. And all we did is we had him perform exercises into the anterior chain. So instead of trying to empower him to open up into extension, it made no sense to me because he had all this lack of ability to move into extension. It made sense to work on that. So here I was, hey, we're going to work on flexion. So we took him into forward movements. And so I put him on his back and I just have him pick his head off the ground. So cervical flexion, and I just have him hold it for like 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and have him do posterior pelvic tilts. And so he had mobility going forward, but it's pretty weak. So he really couldn't do a sit-up. So I had to assist him into a sit-up. Then I'd hold his feet down and have him work very slowly the negative or the lowering phase of a sit-up, where he'd like be able to control it as best he could. He'd be shaking, and I'd have him try to do it like in 5 or 10 seconds. And that's what we did for about 45 minutes, probably just a little shy of an hour. And the next day he calls me and he's like, "What'd you do to me?" And there was like this urgency in his voice. And I'm like, "Oh boy." I'm like, "Did we really screw him up?" Like, I'm like, "Well, what happened? You okay?" He's like, "No, I'm great, actually. Like, what did you do to me?" I'm like, I don't know. Like what's going on? He's like, "Well, all my pain's gone." And he had like decades, like two and a half decades, like since the late 80s. And this is like, this is 2008. So he had, so I guess it'd been like 18 to 25 years out, 2 decades of back pain. He's like, I'm standing taller, man. I'm like 2 or 3 inches taller. And I just played golf this morning. I took 12 strokes off the best round I've shot since the late 1980s. And so I haven't broken 100 since 1988 or 89 or whatever it was. I just shot I think it was either an 88 or 89. So it's weird. So the year was 88 or 89 he shot it, and he either shot an 88 or 89 that morning. So whatever it was 11 or 12 strokes better than he's shot in years. And I didn't believe him at first. So that was the impetus moment behind what now we call square one. So then, that was nuts, man. So the continuation of the story is, for the next 6 weeks after that session, I was like, what just happened? It made no sense, but that's all I could think about. Like, cause it was like the best result I ever had, taking an exact opposite approach from everything I'd ever been trained in doing. So my whole thing was like, look, I know MAT is not bad. I've not killed anybody with MAT. I'm getting 2 out of 3 people, getting some really nice results with this, but what about that third of the population that I'm not helping? And what about Alan? This is the best result I ever had. So this is like undeniable. Something else is at play here. So about 6 weeks later, I got a piece of paper out. I just wrote down a bunch of truths about the human body, the truths that I saw them as. I was looking for things that we could all agree upon. So they'd be like, this is like inarguable stuff. So I didn't want this to be like politics or something. Well, it's this or this, and everybody's arguing. I'm like, what do we all agree upon? Let's circle the wagons and let's get that down concretely. And then once I get that list, and it was stuff like when we go for a walk, we'd have opposite arm and leg swing. It'd be stuff like, no matter where we're moving or how we're moving, our body it's designed to always have our eyes looking straight ahead, flat in the horizon, so that we can maintain balance. So we have this visual input, we have vestibular input. We need to be able to not fall over when we're moving. So I just wrote down, it was a list of like 13, 14, 15 truths. And I looked at it, showed a couple of my buddies. I'm like, hey, any arguments here? Isn't this stuff that we all agree upon? And we did. So then I just started using every one of my clients as a test dummy. So I had this skill set of muscle testing that I learned from MAT. And instead of saying, oh, look, this lat failed or this glute failed, and then start regurgitating a story and completing the story, I refrained from making judgments. What I did is I started using those neuro response tests as neuro response tests. So instead of saying, oh, you got a weak muscle or this or that, it's more, oh, wow, check it out. We can detect change in the human body. And what I really want to know was, how is our body designed to move in light of gravity and the ground? Because I couldn't find it anywhere. Like, where are all the joint actions? There should be maps essentially telling us when the foot hits the ground, this is what your toe does, this is what your ankle does, this is what your knee does, this is what your neck does. And I couldn't find it anywhere. So that's what I sought out to uncover. And I found it like right away. It was crazy. So after about 3 clients, literally buried within her body, I've unearthed these 4 maps. And really, it's a joint by joint action map that details how all the joint actions are involved in going right and left, which is locomotion, and how we go up and down, which is to get upright, or like a static posture. So it's really these two base patterns of, essentially, it's, you call it posture and movement, you call it get upright and locomotion. But we have this joint by joint action map that I basically, that's the big thing that I've discovered. That's probably the biggest thing I'm ever going to discover. I mean, it's like, it's going to be a massive contribution to the industry as people gain an understanding of how important it is to have that basic understanding of human movement. So that's a fairly long version of the story, actually. That's kind of, a lot of the details are in there. So